We will begin the webinar shortly. All right, we'll get started. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon Roberson. I'm President and CEO of YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Thank you for joining the YWCA in today's Stand Against Injustice conversation. Today, we will discuss housing access in a changing Nashville. Before I begin, I would like to thank our generous sponsors, the Nissan Foundation and the Harnish Foundation, because these two entities have continued support of our social justice and advocacy programming. Their partnership helps us have community conversations such as this. As Nashville continues to grow and change, access to safe, stable, and affordable housing remains a critical challenge for so many in our community. For those experiencing homelessness or housing instability, rising costs and limited options make the path to stability very difficult. Because of our work in domestic violence services, we know this all too well. But housing instability is not always simply a matter of affordability. We know this also. Many individuals who face homelessness also confront other barriers, including employment challenges, transportation, mental health or substance abuse issues or concerns, lack of child care, our domestic violence, legal issues, and limited access to education and supportive services. For these individuals, providing a key or a housing unit is only the beginning. Wraparound services and sustained support are often essential, and they help people remain safely housed and move toward long-term stability and hopefully at some point self-sufficiency or near self-sufficiency. Today's conversation will examine the realities facing Nashville's unhoused population and the multiple barriers that can prevent individuals and families from securing and maintaining housing. And this is important because the YW sees that having stable housing as a justice issue. At the YWCA, as we know that as Nashville grows, we must ensure that all individuals are treated with safety, dignity, opportunity, and respect. We are grateful to bring these voices we have on this panel together and their perspectives on how to help our community develop solutions that address not only the housing crisis, but the underlying challenges that too often keep people from achieving housing stability. We have a fantastic panel today of incredible leaders, local leaders in this area, and they're going to have this discussion. And as I say in having these conversations over the years, we invite individuals in the community to these conversations. We don't indict you if you have differences of opinion or don't quite agree with something an individual says, because we are here to learn. Now, we will start by having each panelist introduce themselves and how they fit into this very this puzzle of housing stability in Nashville. They will introduce themselves and they will also briefly describe how the housing crisis in that is there a housing crisis in Nashville. So a brief introduction of yourself, what you do for a living or what you do in this community, and then is there a housing crisis in Nashville? Very briefly. I'll start with you, Mr. Wiltshire.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. And let me add my thanks not just to the YWCA, but to Nissan and the Harnish Foundation as well. Thank you for supporting this really important conversation at this moment in our city's history. So I currently serve as the president of the Pathway Housing Fund, which is part of Pathway Lending, a nonprofit CDFI that I believe is partnered with YWCA on a number of initiatives. Pathway Lending, first of all, provides lending and community education for businesses that are just getting started, and businesses been around for a while but are underserved by traditional banking institutions. But we receive our financial support from those great banks around Nashville and around the state of Tennessee. Pathway's been around for more than 25 years now, has grown to 400 million in assets, again, making loans to underserved communities. I joined Pathway about 2 years ago now to do something a little bit different. We raised, as I mentioned, low cost capital from banks, but instead of re-lending this money, we're using this capital, about 30 million raised thus far, to acquire and preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. And I look forward to having this conversation. It is a puzzle. You used the right word, Sharon. It is a real puzzle on housing, but it's really mostly just a math problem. It is, what does it cost to build housing or preserve housing? And then what does it cost to rent it in a sustainable way? And there are amazing ways to subsidize that at things like villages where you can get reduced land cost. But what we're looking to do is to preserve the housing that exists today, because it is so expensive to build new housing units. Even if you're receiving subsidies from the government in form of low-income housing tax credits, it's really impossible to find housing that's affordable, particularly folks emerging from homelessness, as we'll hear from Allison and others. But we're looking to preserve what does exist, because that's in many ways the least expensive form of housing, preserving what we already have. This role, the Pathway Housing Fund, for me, is sort of a culmination of my professional career. I'm a Nashville native, but spent about 15 years in investment banking and venture capital, learning spreadsheets, and then spent 8 years in the mayor's office working for 3 different mayors, learning politics and public policy, and then spent 3 or 4 years at MDHA, the city's public housing authority, learning affordable housing policy before running for mayor in 2023. And the campaign that Isaac was the treasurer for won, and Mayor O'Connell is doing a great job as our mayor. And so I've had the opportunity now to serve in this role for the last 2 years. So thank you.
All right. It's Julia Sutherland. And I'll start off with this last name formal. After that, you're going to be Julia, Matt, Allison, and Isaac. But we'll start off right.
Right.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you. And thanks, Matt, for the shout out about what we're doing. My name is Julia Sutherland. I am executive director at the Village at Glencliff. We are a 12-home, tiny home community on the campus of Glencliff United Methodist Church. We are a medical respite community, and what that means is folks who are experiencing homelessness, who end up in the hospital and would possibly be discharged to the street. This happens quite often. We work with case managers at Nashville hospitals to bring them to one of our tiny homes, and then we keep them long-term until they find housing. So we serve both as emergency shelter and transitional housing. And while folks are with us, we do what we call a narrow and deep wraparound services for them. So we'll do everything from making sure they get back to all of their medical appointments. We help them look into specialists if they don't already have those for our folks with more critical issues like cancer and COPD, lupus, AIDS. We have a lot of people with complex comorbidities. And then even like down to smaller things that folks who are housed or have health insurance don't really think about as critical, but vision and dental, and the vast difference that it can make when you can see properly and when you can chew your food. And certainly being able to chew your food is, when you're talking about Matt was saying earlier that he is type 1 diabetic. And when you're having to deal with diabetes and you're looking at your nutrition, and then it's even more limited because you can't chew food, that's critical. So we do all of those wraparound services and we help people navigate into housing. We also help people apply for disability. Most of the folks who come to us, by the time they get to us, definitely meet the requirements for disability. And that is a long process. So they get to stay with us until they get into housing. And right now, 100% of our graduates are still in housing. We've been operational for right at 5 years, almost 5 years. Amazing. We have a wonderful partnership with Office of Homeless Services. Allison is our point person, and that has been an incredible partnership. They fund 3 of our houses. And so, yeah, the way I'm also a Nashville native. And so I ended up here after a career in commercial real estate and marketing, and then a slight detour into affordable housing with Eddie Latimer and some development with the mainland companies. And yeah, Matt, I'm with you. It's like ending up in a place where my way earlier was running the Belcourt Theater. So that was my nonprofit, and tying all of that into this, I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. And it's amazing to be able to be our small part of the COC, continuum of care. We couldn't do what we do without Allison, Matt, Sharon, all of the different people who are part of the COC and make this work. So it is a heavy lift, but we're really excited to be the small piece of the pie that we are.
All right, Allison Cantway.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Allison Cantway. I work for Metro for the Office of Homeless Services. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning and Research. I've been in this department for about 3 years, and before that, did about a decade of DV work. I was part of the original crew that opened the Family Safety Center, and then before that, I worked at the YWCA. So I'm happy to be among friends always. So our office's role. We're 3 years old. We were created by then council member Freddie O'Connell, now Mayor Freddie O'Connell, as our own standalone department in 2023. We really coordinate Metro's response to homelessness. And so we do a lot of things, right? So we fund lots of great programs in the community that are providing housing, interventions, all of those sorts of things, including Julia, as she said. That's the majority of what our budget goes to. We also provide street outreach and housing navigation, working with other agencies in town that need help placing their folks. And we also offer employment services. In addition to that, we run Metro's first publicly funded permanent supportive housing building, the Strobel House, which is 90 units of permanent supportive housing. And so, we provide all of those things to Metro as part of our government office. And we play a very important role in the continuum of care, which is what Julia was talking about. The continuum of care is all of the agencies that provide any sort of services around folks experiencing homelessness. So we are the lead for the HMIS system, which is the shared database system. So we run that system for the city. We're the lead on the coordinated entry system, the system that makes referrals to make sure that folks get good placements. And then we are the collaborative applicant, which is an important role in receiving HUD funding here in Nashville. So that's what we do. I would agree that yes, we are certainly in a housing crisis right now. I know that homelessness here in Nashville is increasing, homelessness nationwide is increasing, and interventions that we know and that are proven to work are really at risk right now. So it's certainly at a crisis point. I agree.
All right, Mr. Isaac Aday.
Thanks for having me. It's really good to be a part of this conversation. I'm Isaac Adai. You can call me Isaac. I currently am executive director for the River Prosperity Project, which is a new entity being incubated out of the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. And we are focused on community development in East and North Nashville, communities that are adjacent or along the Cumberland River banks. We know that there's a river of cash flowing through Nashville, through the East Bank, and we want to ensure that we're digging channels of prosperity to flow into communities that are nearby. And so our work is focused on how do we get organizations in the communities to engage their real estate assets to build things to benefit the community, such as housing, such as daycares, or small business support services or workforce development services. And we are really moving forward and catching steam with this work. I have spent time in the mayor's office, as my good friend Matt said, did some community development work. I did some small business development work. But at the core, I'm a problem solver and a former computer engineer. So I worked in tech. I've been a college professor. I used to come to Nashville as a kid, and then I came here for Tennessee State, left and came back in 2015. And I've been here for over 11 years. And what I can tell you is that this is a magical place, but it has evolved tremendously. And the ways in which it has evolved have impacted people who aren't at certain income levels. If they're not at certain income levels, they're not able to participate in the prosperity that our city is enjoying. And housing is one of the first places that we see that. It's expensive to live in Nashville. When I moved back from the DC area in 2015, I found an apartment in Germantown. I loved it. It was nice. Couldn't make that same move today because affordability has just gone through the roof. And we know that there are factors that we can control and some that we cannot control, but we can be intentional about how we think about solving some of these problems. So I'm happy to be here with you all today.
All right, thank you. And I'll go ask each of you in more detail about your piece of the puzzle. And Matt, Pathway Housing Fund. We often hear affordable housing, and you mentioned in your earlier response that you're focused on not only new, because a lot of people think new, you're trying to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing before it disappears. Why is this so important to this conversation?
Sure. Math is the short answer. It's just math. So today, because of construction costs, labor costs, the codes, the requirements on building a new structure, land cost, all the things that Dr. Adai was talking about, it is expensive to build a new unit. It probably costs at least $250,000 to build a new unit of housing. That depends on if it's a one bedroom or a two bedroom or a three bedroom. And there's a lot of permutations that we don't need to get into in this conversation, although I'm always happy to. But it's just expensive to build new. And at the same time, so keep that number in mind, $250,000 to build a new unit of housing. At the same time, you can acquire existing units of housing that are probably older, maybe need a little bit of TLC, but you can acquire those for $130,000. We've bought units for $100,000 before. And often these are older units in nicer neighborhoods, or sometimes they're in nicer neighborhoods. And nicer is such a loaded phrase, but just places where there are jobs, where there are retail opportunities, where there are ways where kids can improve their educational outcomes. And so preserving those units is vitally important, because what often happens, just based on market dynamics, is someone will identify that, buy that unit, and either tear it down or put in a new fresh coat of paint, landscape it, and jack the rents up 40%. And they aren't evil people. They're doing what the market is demanding of them. That they're meeting market demand. But once that $900 a month apartment or $1,000 a month apartment goes away, it is gone forever. It can't be replaced because it costs $250,000 to build a new unit of housing. So I am for housing. I am pro housing. I'm pro new housing. I'm pro building housing. I'm pro density. It's just a math problem. And there are lots of tensions, and I, understand all sides of the tension. Folks don't want a bunch of new housing near them. They are called NIMBYs, but the reality is it will impact their commute to work, or it'll take longer to make that right turn. And so I think it's important to honor and understand the challenges that folks have. But to answer your question directly, I think it's vitally important to follow the math and preserve the housing that we have, particularly apartment communities that are in gentrifying or gentrified neighborhoods, so that we can keep folks close to the jobs, close to their churches, close to their kids' schools, close to their doctors. Otherwise, we're contributing to the traffic challenges we already have, because you're just forcing folks further and further and further out. You're making it tougher for small businesses to find employees to work there. It's just problematic for all aspects of this community. And so if we can preserve naturally occurring affordable housing in gentrifying neighborhoods, it's better for all of us.
And I'll add to that, there's often transportation in those neighborhoods too, which is always a barrier for the people that we serve.
And let me, if I could just piggyback on that, it's exactly what this city has: amazing resources available to help people, whether it's in Metro or nonprofits, but it's damn near impossible to navigate how to find all those resources. I mean, it's hard being poor. It's like really hard work because you don't have the resources to make it easy to do things. And so making sure that we have co-location of services and make it easier for people to get to the services that do exist are better for everybody. Sorry, that's a bit of a soapbox, but thank you for giving me that moment.
Well, good. We love it. Julie, I love the Villages model, and your work is on that intersection of housing, healthcare, and what we at the YW view as human justice and dignity. What does recovery look like when someone doesn't have a safe space to live? And how does medical respite change what is possible for people experiencing homelessness?
Thanks, Sharon. It's a lot. It's a lot to answer. I will Matt's word of the day is math. Mine's going to be wages. When you look, and this is, I'm going to tie it into equity. The federal minimum wage today is $7.25 an hour. It's been there since 2009. And when I say that to people, a lot of people don't realize that. And then they say, oh, well, but an employer can pay whatever they want to. Well, yeah, they can, but it makes them look like the good guy when they pay $10 an hour when minimum wage is only $7.25, and $10 doesn't cut it these days. And Matt's being very kind. I don't think all the investors and developers are not evil. I think some of them are not good. Because I have had a lot of friends where investors have come in, bought wonderful, affordable housing, had a full rent roll, people paying their rent, and then they kick them all out because, as Matt said, you can put a lick of paint here, a lick of paint there, and then you jack up the rent. I am watching on my social media feed because my former life, I get curious when I see these ads for apartments come up, and so they now fill my social media feed. We have 1, 2, and 3 free months rent going on now with apartments. And that's not to say we're totally overbuilt, but Nashville got very popular, as we know, with the television show, and we became the It City. And now we're the second worst housing market in the country. So we have to go back and look at where wages play a role, because his company just bought the Mayflower. We were talking about people live there. I lived there from 2001 to 2007, and I had a 2-bedroom for $650 a month. And I couldn't always pay it because I was working for a nonprofit, but my landlord gave me a little leeway and didn't kick me out, and then I'd make it up when I could. That doesn't always exist anymore. But honestly, now we're in 2026, 2000 a month is actually not that crazy had wages kept pace. So I do agree with Matt, absolutely, everything he's saying about housing, but we also have to look at when we have folks, and he said it's hard to be poor, it's a full-time job to be poor. So when you're making minimum wage or just over minimum wage, possibly you don't have health care, you have one medical incident that puts you in the hospital, and you may be injured enough or sick enough that you have to miss enough work that they don't let you come back. And all of a sudden, you go from teetering on the edge to maybe you can't pay rent, so you get evicted. You're then living in your car, which is not healthy. Maybe you have a pet, maybe you have kids, and the snowball happens so quickly. And we can point and say, oh, that's only really, really poor people. Well, look at the number. I mean, I have friends with cancer who have started GoFundMe accounts. And I don't know of any other developed country in the world that where we're starting GoFundMe accounts because you can't pay for your cancer care. It's crazy. So the equity, Sharon, is that when we're taking somebody into the village, when they're getting ready to be discharged to the street, it costs money for any of us to be sick. But presumably those of us who are on this call have a solid job. Maybe we have some savings, but we probably have family who are able-bodied who might be able to bring us a casserole, make sure we can get our prescriptions, loan us a little bit of money. We have friends, we have a safety network. If you have moved to a new city and you don't have that safety network, if you have had a really unfortunate situation, your parents died, you don't have siblings, you're going through a divorce, you don't talk to your kid. There are so many reasons why people don't have that safety network. So when we look at equity, equity is just about how do we level that playing field of filling in the gap for people who don't have that safety net of community and family. And so when they come to the village, we're being that community for them, picking up their prescriptions, making sure they have a ride to go back to their health care. And as Matt said, navigating resources, a lot of which are there. If you're sick, if you're on painkillers, it's really hard to think about getting online, especially when you don't have a phone, because when you got hit by a car, you lost all your stuff. So we're navigating all of that so people can get back on their feet. And we do see a lot of times when we help people get to a certain point, their community starts to grow and get stronger. And so, I don't know in my life, if I had a severe illness and I were sick for a long time, I don't know how many of my friends would show up week after week after week. It gets hard on people and it's hard on caretakers. So that for me is the equity of looking at how we can bridge the gap between people who are not making enough with the crazy cost of healthcare, and to ensure, and even when you do, some of our folks do come in with healthcare, but it doesn't cover everything they need it to cover. And some of our folks do have income, Social Security or disability, but it's not going to pay for $2,000 a month rent or even $1,500 a month rent. So that is where we're leveling those out and filling in the gap and being what I call a resilient community. That if I want to stay in Nashville, I need people like Matt and Allison and Isaac and Sharon helping us have that resilient community to care for folks whose equity is not at the level of other people's right now.
All right. Well, okay. Dr. Isaac, the River Prosperity Project. Love, love, love the name. But at the YW, for instance, we believe that when we are helping individuals transition from a domestic violence shelter, the foundation of their upward mobility or their prosperity in the community is housing, because without that housing, they lose so many options. How should Nashville be thinking about housing as part of a larger economic mobility strategy?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And we built the river around the concept of advancing economic mobility, and housing is one of those pillars because you can't progress from a socioeconomic perspective if you don't have adequate housing and if you don't have housing that aligns with the workforce or the lifestyle that you need. I think the city is making strides toward this. I want to give the city credit. You know, I just left the groundbreaking. I was running late to this session because there was a new affordable development by Holiday Ventures that was just they just did a ribbon cutting over in East Nashville today, Park 24. And we've seen other partnerships and other organizations doing some things. We're moving the needle. It's just that our gap is so big. And I think one of our strategic opportunities is to leverage existing organizations' real estate assets. So if you think about churches, if you think about nonprofits, academic institutions, or even health institutions, for example. In the core of Nashville, there are a lot of parcels of land that are owned by these institutions, and much of this land is owned free and clear. And Matt talks about the expensive cost of development, but when you can bring land into the equation, you can reduce that cost to build significantly and leverage that real estate to be able to bring an asset into the community. And we're seeing more of that. And that's some of the work that we're doing to engage with partners who don't have development expertise, but have the greatest thing, which is the land. And we can align them with partners, we can align them with financing and developers and help create solutions within the community without us having to wait for someone else to come and build it for us.
Right. All right. Allison, I will say this, like so many issues, there are always systemic problems that lead us to where we are. And you're working at the systems level of what's systemic about our community in our homelessness response. What does the current homelessness landscape look like in Nashville? And what do you wish more residents understood about who is experiencing homelessness and why?
Yeah. Homelessness, I think, is a systemic issue throughout the country. There are lots of different factors. Nashville, for the last several years, has been feeling a lot of housing pressure, like much of the country. It is becoming less and less affordable. And we know that homelessness in Nashville has been rising. You know, and I hear from a lot of people who, like, the city's invested a lot of money in, you know, homeless services. Why is homelessness increasing? You know, like, does that mean that there's no progress being made? But what we see is that across the nation and other similarly sized cities, homelessness is going up at a much, much higher rate than it is here in Nashville. So we are holding that rate down, but it doesn't change the fact, right, that more people are experiencing homelessness. I think the things that I would like for folks to know, there are a lot of myths about homelessness out there, right? You know, we hear people say, well, you know, folks are busted, or they come here to Nashville because they hear that there are services available. You know, we've done studies that, you know, during our point in time count that show that the vast majority of people that are experiencing homelessness here are from here and have lived here. We hear from a lot of folks that, you know, they think that homelessness is a mental health issue or a drug issue. You know, and the statistics bear out the majority of people with substance use disorder are housed. The majority of people with mental health disorders are housed. So while, and I don't want to downplay that those are issues for folks experiencing homelessness, they often are, but that's typically not the cause of their homelessness. Typically, the cause of their homelessness is that they lost their housing for one reason or another, right? So it could be, as Julia said, it could be medical bills. It could be, you know, the rent was, you know, they had a rent hike. They could have lost their job. They could have been experiencing domestic violence. Domestic violence is the leading cause of family homelessness here in Nashville, right? Most people are just one incident, one paycheck, one life event away from experiencing homelessness. And so I think that it's important that folks know that. You know, a lot of these folks have done everything in their power to access as many resources as they can to try to prevent this from happening. I think another thing that is important for people to know is that, you know, we see visible homelessness all the time, all of us, when we drive into work, right? We'll see people who are experiencing homelessness on the street. It's extremely dangerous to be unsheltered. But I also want people to know that, what you see on your particular drive to work, that might not be illustrative of the majority of people here in Nashville, right? So I hear people say, well, this person that I've seen, I think they have X issue going on, or and that may be true, but that might not be true of the entire population. We have a very varied population, and there are a lot of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness that are not visible. Let me tell you, our city does, or our office does, on days when it's really, really hot, we do, heat response, where we go out and pass out cold water and cooling towels and, food and that kind of stuff. I went out with the heat patrol team a couple of weeks ago. We had that stretch of like 10 days where the heat index was over 100. Let me tell you, there are folks outside that you would not know are there. Our outreach workers know where they are, and we can get down there and serve them. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is that there is a really varied experience of homelessness in Nashville. But the one thing that they have in common is that they need housing. And I think what's important for folks to know is that we have interventions that work. We know that they work. Prevention and diversion works. Permanent supportive housing works. But I think a good way to think about this is, if folks falling into homelessness is, water running from a faucet into the bathtub, these interventions are really, really good at bailing out water from the bathtub, right? They're extremely good, but it doesn't stop the inflow. It doesn't stop the number of people that are falling into homelessness. And so it's vital that we continue these interventions because we know that they work, but we also have to address some of these systemic issues that make folks fall into homelessness in the first place.
All right. Matt, when we look at a traditional SWOT analysis, we look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So there are some vulnerabilities that we know that are existing in the affordable housing space in Nashville. What forces are making Nashville's existing affordable housing more vulnerable, and what kind of tools or partnerships do you feel are needed to protect it?
Yeah. So there are two things for all of us. Well, I won't say for all of us. For me, I will say, and loved ones who I know, our strengths are our weaknesses. I've seen that so often. And that's true for our city as well. Our city's strength is its weakness in this regard. Nashville has become an incredibly attractive place that lots of people want to be, and that's a good thing. You don't want to live in a crappy place that no one wants to live. You want to be an attractive place, and the better we do at making Nashville more attractive, the more people are going to move here. And when they do, there's increased demand for housing and increased demand in particular over the last decade for high wage housing. It's just what's happened. A lot of folks who have a lot of money have said, man, Nashville's a great place to live and I want to move there. And that is a good thing. It's a difficult thing. It brings tremendous challenges, but you wouldn't want the alternative. You don't want to be a place that people don't want to be. So how do you manage that challenge? That's the real difficulty. And in particular, for housing, it's been a real issue because of the second challenge, which is we have not made it easier to build in Nashville. We've made it harder. The zoning code, if you ever want to listen to all things zoning, listen to Pod Bless Nashville. It's a great podcast that Braden Gall and Jamie Holland do. And just about every episode, it could be about any issue. And Jamie's going to bring up the fact that the zoning code was created in 1998 or 1999. And so the zoning code is outdated. It's difficult to build. And folks don't want their neighborhoods to change. And all of that is, again, understandable, but it restricts our ability to increase the supply of housing. And when you have significant demand for housing and you don't have the safety valve of increasing supply, what happens? It's economics 101. The price goes up, and then that puts pressure on everybody, especially those who are most vulnerable. It's just math. And so I think that the answer then with that explanation is twofold. One, that we've become an attractive, even more attractive city that lots of people want to move to. I don't think we want to change that. We want to become even better We want our schools to be better. If our schools are going to be better, more people are going to want to move here to have their kids in our schools. And if you think about the impact that has, look at Williamson County. Lots of people think Williamson County schools are the best, and it costs $1 million is the average home price in Williamson County. And so we want our schools to be better, and the result then is prices go up. And they will go up even more if we don't create the safety valve of allowing more supply to be created. So that's it. That's the whole story.
All right. Julia, and your piece of this puzzle truly, truly intrigues me, because I know that there are individuals, there's this hospital to homelessness. There's actually something that's called hospital to homelessness. And I think that the health equity issue is huge when we are looking at this really difficult issue. What do you wish more people understood about this and seeing homelessness as a health equity issue?
Yeah, I am very into sustainability. And I mentioned before the resilience of the city. And you go back to the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I'm listening to everybody talk, and I'm thinking about, this equity. Back in 2009, in a panic, Congress passed the Hearth Act, and it extended the McKinney-Vento Act. And what happened was we had the housing crisis. The bubble had burst with all the bad loans. And you had a ton of people with mortgages who were getting ready to foreclose. And the banks panicked, and they didn't want these foreclosures on their books. And so one side of Congress said, we got to keep people from losing their housing, because that's a whole domino effect. They got that. Luckily, the other side of Congress said, oh, and we have other people who are going to lose their housing, who don't have mortgages, who are poor, and we're going to tack this on. And so the Hearth Act was really an incredible piece of legislation, bipartisan, that helped, I believe, and Allison can correct me if I'm wrong, really helped us consolidate a continuum of care formation in major cities, and helped us do a better job communicating, and funded a lot of that communication to help us communicate with you at the YW and at the mission and different, whoever's we need help from. And the reason I talk about that is that it seems to be easier for us to panic about people who have mortgages losing their housing and paying for that, or paying for car companies who are getting ready to fall off a cliff. But when it comes to people who are in the hospital ready to lose their housing, somehow not everybody can see that a little bit of money there preventing people from losing their housing saves a community so much more money. So policy-wise, I'm looking at how do we really look upstream. And there are ways. Matt was talking about all these resources, but a lot of times people don't know about them until it's too late. But looking upstream at ways that when you are housed and you're on the verge of losing your housing because you get sick, because you lose your job, because your rent goes up, it would be so much less expensive to fund keeping those people in housing and giving them some health care, giving them some home health, whatever, than to let them go through the hospital in Nashville, put burden on our EMT responders, police, fire, emergency rooms, and then they end up on the street, which, and I'll give you some numbers, again, Allison can tell me if I'm wrong, it cost a community roughly 90 to 110,000 a year for every person living on the street. Now, if you back that up and you look at what it cost us to house someone for a year, and knowing they're going to be getting into housing, which means instead of every year that person costing Nashville 100,000, we're looking more at 40,000 or 30,000. And then when they get into housing and maybe they go back to work, or maybe they're contributing to their own rent, you're reducing that even more. multiply that. And for me, I look at, I'm going to call out the Cicero Institute. Some people have been following this in the news. I'll go ahead and say it. They've come forward. You got a multi-billionaire saying, who, by the way, himself could solve the housing problem financially. All right, let's just put that out there. Coming back and saying the best way to do this is to criminalize homelessness and also reduce federal funding for permanent supportive housing. So these things, when you're looking at fiscal conservancy, and I'm kind of all over the map here, but getting back to wages, getting back to money, it is much more fiscally conservative to spend the money up front to keep people housed. And whether we're able to do that before they go into the hospital or fund something like permanent supportive housing or Office of Homeless Services or the Village at Glencliff to keep people housed rather than go to the street where their health deteriorates and their situation further, mental health deteriorates. Keeping people housed saves a city so much money. So that's where I'll land on this one thing. But yeah, I can't remember if I answered your question, Sharon.
You did very well, very well. All right, Dr. Isaac, I'm sure that you have done research in other cities who have made an investment so that the community has transformed, or maybe bits and pieces, because you can learn a lot from failures as well as successes. What can Nashville learn from places that have approached housing and mobility at scale?
Sure. We have been tracking two specific examples. Well, let me say three. The city of Indianapolis, the city of Charlotte, and the city of Atlanta, right? Atlanta set up something called the West Side Future Fund to preserve as much real estate as they could around the new Superdome or Mercedes-Benz Dome redevelopment, which would help preserve housing and keep it at an attainable pricing level. We saw executive leaders come together with Charlotte's Executive Leadership Council and put a big sum of money together to buy and preserve apartments in Charlotte and keep them at an affordable level, similar to what Matt and his team are doing here in Nashville. And something that's really unique, back in 2012, some years ago, the city of Indianapolis hosted a Super Bowl, just like we will be doing in a few years. And they used all of the energy and the hype around the Super Bowl to drive investment in specific communities where they redeveloped those communities because they knew that there was a lot of capital coming into the city, and they worked together to leverage that to build real estate and engage in some affordable housing development. So there are examples nationwide of communities that are tackling these challenges. Clearly, it's not an easy issue, but just this week, we're seeing some of the largest banks in the United States put up money to invest and support affordable housing. We're seeing bigger development corporations who have typically not gotten in affordable. They're now getting into it. So something's shifting in the atmosphere where nationwide we're seeing more partners getting engaged to do this work. And in Nashville, we've got great local examples of teams that are doing great work, but we need more support.
All right. Allison, Metro Homeless Services works across providers, public system, community partners, including the YW. What kinds of coordination or partnerships are most needed right now to help us move toward from what we view as a crisis to stability?
We need all the partnerships, all of them. And I know that that's a really big answer, but there is no like one perfect answer. So we need to pull every lever that is available to us. Just period. I think that we serve a really diverse clientele in the city. And so like we need different types of programs. We need programs that are, based on recovery. We need programs that are based on DV. We need programs that are faith-based. We need all of it. We need at its core, what we need places that are offering trauma-informed services and that are following a housing first model. And housing first has gotten kind of a bad rap in the media recently, but just to clarify that a little bit, housing first is the idea that folks should be housed with services, and to access that, they don't have to get sober first. They don't have to take their medicine first. They are just provided with housing and services. It is the most research-based model that we have. I think that a lot of people, they think of the idea of housing only. Oh, well, let's just, help someone get into housing and then say bye. And that doesn't work. You're right. That doesn't work. The services are an integral part. And when there aren't the services there, it's not really housing first. So I've heard a lot of people say, well, housing first doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work if you're not actually implementing it correctly with services. Those services are absolutely essential here in Nashville. We need more of those supportive services. Here in Nashville, we need more subsidies, right? So subsidies like vouchers, flexible funding. That's something that our office is currently operating, a flex funding rapid rehousing program. We're in a pilot phase right now. MNPS has started a program that's really similar. Rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. Those are subsidies that we know are successful, and they're currently under attack at the federal level. So we need every partner. I think I liked what Matt said about our strengths also being our weaknesses. I think one of the strengths that we have here in Nashville is we have people who are very concerned. We have people who are very passionate about this work. And that's not always easy, right? Because people have different philosophies, people have different opinions. And that's okay. That's good. This is not meant to be easy work, but I think as long as what I always try to come back to is the North Star of, we want to focus on housing as many people, the folks that are in the most need. If we come back to that, it's about housing the people. Then I think that we work pretty well as a system.
Yeah, I agree. And we always like to leave these conversations with a level of hope, because I think that if you are doing this work every day, if you did not have hope that things could be better for all, then you would not be doing what you're doing. So for someone attending this conversation, it may seem difficult and they want to plug in some way, in a meaningful way, to help be supportive of this effort, because housing justice is a local issue that we have to tackle. I'm going to ask each one of you to leave us with something hopeful and give advice to those that are listening to help them see, what can I do if I really want to help really my community, my neighbors, my tribe to have housing justice. I'll start with you, Matt.
Well, I think conversations like this are the place to start for it. So making sure that people are aware of the challenges and aware of the nuances of it. And then I think, look, the city the city and the state are the two entities that are best positioned to be able to provide that assistance, both directly and as a coordinating entity. I mean, again, I get back to this issue of there are tremendous resources available in our city already. This was the idea behind the Magruder Center, which is there are resources available for people. It's just too damn hard to navigate them. And so having entities like the city or the state or the federal government to co-locate services to make it easier to navigate the systems that already exist, to take away the bullshit paperwork that exists. I mean, it's demeaning to have to fill out 75 pages worth of paperwork to get like help that is just good for you and good for the community. And so I think keeping a relentless focus on making it easier to help folks who we want to help, understanding that it's better for all of us. It reduces crime. It reduces other challenges that we have in a community. And so even if you're just being purely self-interested, understand not only does it make you feel good to see that your community is doing better, it's like genuinely, objectively, financially better for you. So it's worth advocating for streamlining services, making it easier for folks to help themselves and not beating folks up. And so I think that comes with conversations like these. But then, after you turn the podcast off, you got to get out there and do the hard work. And so Sharon, let me say thank you again to you and your team at the YWCA who've been doing that work in an exceptional way for a long time.
Well, thank you, Matt. And Julia, give us some hope.
Yeah, all right. I'm sure everybody was looking at all the Dolly Parton stuff all yesterday and today, and I see new things and then I start crying again. But a beautiful one that I saw last night was her collaboration with Lady Smith Black Mambazo for Peace Train. And I just want to quote, because this struck me. Somebody said, Dolly had this great way of, at one point, one way she called out hardship, talking about her life in Appalachia or, 9 to 5. Like, these are people, working class people, but she also had hope and beauty in all of her music. And I think you can have that cognitive dissonance. But the first paragraph of the lyrics of Peace Train, now I've been happy lately, thinking about the good things to come, and I believe it could be something good has begun. And you look at what Matt's achieving, what Isaac's achieving, Allison, the YW, Sharon, and what we're doing. We are making a difference. People, the news will tell you that we're not, and we're fighting an upstream battle. But we look at what we're doing, we look at the success in Houston, Dallas, what Isaac said about Atlanta. Every city has a model that is moving something positive forward. And so as we continue to talk to each other and we continue to advocate for the dollars to keep making it happen, they say that your budget reflects your values. And so as a city, looking at where our dollars are going and why, if we really want a resilient, sustainable city, and we really want to be fiscally conservative, it is a challenge to look long-term and spend that money that is going to impact whether it's housing, healthcare, sidewalks, whatever it is, but looking at that long-term that in the end reduces our overall cost. That is a hard thing for leadership to do. It's a hard thing for taxpayers to do and say, this is where our values are and this is where our money is going to go. So I am at one point, like Dolly, you've got to talk about the hardship that people have and how they are getting through that, but also the hope that we know how to fix this. We know how to address all of these things. So we have to keep pushing forward because I know that it can happen. And I know I have wonderful people like you guys helping to make it happen.
All right, Dr. Isaac, give us some hope.
You put me behind the Dolly comments. That's unfair. But
I
but all right, I'll bring it. I'll share a few thoughts here. One thing about Nashville that we know, whenever we experience a crisis, we come together like no other city can. We saw that with the flood, and we saw that with the tornado, and what was that, 2020? Yeah, 2020 March.
Yeah. 2010 for the flood, 2020 for the tornado.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. Yeah. And so just seeing the city rally around crisis and come together for our neighbors and show up, it's a beautiful thing, and it's a part of our DNA, and it's a muscle that we can flex in an incredible way. But I don't think we have to view those types of crises as the only times we come together. We're in a crisis right now as it relates to affordability and housing, and we can leverage that same approach and rally together. I think that's what makes Nashville great. We've got the resources, we've got opportunity, we've got willing partners. Let's just bring that sense of urgency together and rally around these issues. We can solve them.
All right, Allison.
Julia, I'm so glad that and I believe that those are lyrics from the song Peace Train that was written by Nashvilleian Cat Stevens.
Great.
I love that. I think that's like a wonderful place for us to end. I think we get to see hope on kind of the macro and the micro level. On the macro level, for example, HUD tried to make some changes in federal funding for homelessness throughout the country. And several cities, including Nashville, filed a lawsuit. And we found out a couple weeks ago that we won that lawsuit, which is very exciting. But then, of course, we see hope on the micro level, too. Man, every time that one of our outreach workers is able to help get somebody into housing, it's just like we have to celebrate every single one of those wins. We have to realize that that is ending homelessness for that person. That is a really, really big deal. And so that's what I always try to keep at the center.
All right. Thank you, panelists. We hope that we have educated the community on this issue. And I think that people need to understand that one solution is not a one solution issue, it's a multi-solution issue. And the more that we pull each one of those levers, the more we move towards solving an issue that's a community issue. I will say this, the YW, I want to invite you to another event. We continue to gather on an annual basis. We have a Stand Against Injustice community rally, a fabulous event. And this year we're talking about Standing Against Injustice community event. This is a follow-up to the Voting Rights Act event anniversary that we hosted last year. Again, it will be at Scarrett Bennett, September 10th at 11:30 to 1. So you can join us at Scarrett Bennett. Again, I thank the panelists because it's conversations like this that get people thinking. And often in our community, we don't take enough time just to sit and think about issues. Hats off to Dolly. She had me thinking about things, kindness, community, more than I have in a very long time. And I do this for a living, so I do this. But she had me thinking about how one person can transform a community and just with kindness. And that's important. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to be really bad and throw out. We at the Village have a $20,000 match grant going on until Sunday, which is unexpected and very cool. So if anybody wants to, I put our website in the text. Feel free to go and donate because it will double your donation. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.